Ready. Okay, if everyone's ready, we'll go ahead and get started. If you would, please join me in welcoming Dr. Brenda Rickett to Jacksonville. Just we'll go through some logistics. If you need a break or anything, we can stop for a minute. I know we may need one as well. We're trying to limit this to an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at the worst case scenario. And, we've got 6 really great candidates, and we're very excited about that as a system. And we're looking for the perfect fit for our school. So we're excited that you are interested in this job.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity.
As we get started, if you would just kind of introduce yourself and let me introduce the board first. If everyone would just introduce themselves.
Hey, I'm Kelly Pierce.
Emily Sims.
David Glass.
Steve Smith.
And Mike Poe.
And I believe you're on a tour today and you met Mr. Neighbors and
I did.
Those kinds of things. If you would just give us a brief review of your education and work history.
Okay. I was born and raised in Tuscaloosa, so I went to the University of Alabama and received my bachelor's and master's in elementary education, and then a doctorate from there in educational leadership. I spent 7.5 years in the classroom in Tuscaloosa City. I taught grades 1, 4, and 5 at different times in there, and then went to Tuscaloosa County to be assistant principal at Inglewood Elementary. I spent 3.5 years there and then became principal in Tuscaloosa County of Maxwell Elementary. Spent 12 years there and then moved to Opelika, and from one football capital to the other, and have been there 8 years as assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction.
Excellent. Now there is a third ball capital that we think may be emerging.
Well, I've heard that, and I am quite willing to put that into my repertoire of where I've lived. So that would be great.
I think, does anybody have anything before we get started with the questions? And we'll just rotate the questions through the board, and after the question, there may be a follow-up or two. Find my question. First up, Mr. Steve, you have question number 1.
As superintendent of a school system, a large portion of the day is devoted to making numerous decisions that involve multiple stakeholders. Describe your decision-making style and provide a few examples of strategies you have used in different situations with various stakeholders.
Okay. That's really kind of a multifaceted question. There's a couple of things that I want to make sure that I can say in this. First of all, decision-making is definitely situational. There are times where you have to make decisions quickly. They need to be direct and straightforward. There are other times when decisions are made through a collaborative process. Most of the time, they're able to be made through a collaborative process. And in doing so, it's very important to go back to what is the vision and mission of the school system. What is best for children is the number one question to ask in making that decision. And then allowing the stakeholders, the people involved, to offer suggestions, opinions. I definitely think that the wisdom of the group usually comes to better decisions than the wisdom of just one, because everybody has different experiences to bring to the table. So most of the decision making is done in a very collaborative way. In working with teachers and administrators, in collaboration, bringing groups together. And I know there's a question on curriculum in a little while, so I'll try to save some of that, but working on putting together curriculums and pacing guides. You need the teachers there. The teachers really have the most important job in the system, because what happens in the classroom every day is what's going to make a difference in students' lives. And so involving especially teachers and administrators in those decisions that directly affect them is very critical. Working with community members, everybody seems to have strong opinions, as they should. As parents, we all feel like we know what's best for our child. And a lot of times it's taking time to listen, to hear, and focus back to what is our objective. What is it that you are wanting to see out of this? What is it that we're wanting to see out of this? And how can we come to some decisions that we feel like are best for children, but also help address any concerns that are in there? So decision making is, there's not one style that I would say, but I believe in listening, talking, looking back at objectives, where are we trying to go, what is that vision that we've set forth. But the number one question is what's best for students. Right behind that would be what's best for our employees, because you have to take very good care of employees as well.
Thank you.
Any follow-up? Okay. Mike, I believe you're up next, number 2.
Yep. Again, welcome to Jacksonville. Glad you're here. Roll Tide.
Roll time.
My question is, explain how you would develop a system budget and tell us who you would involve and how you would involve them. As a follow-up, how would you prioritize cuts in the budget if it was necessary?
Okay, before I answer that, go Gamecocks, right? Okay. Roll Tide, go Gamecocks. All right, got that. Budget. Budgets are very difficult and very time-consuming. You will hear me say a lot, you have to know what your vision and mission is, because if you don't know where you're going, you do not know how to allocate your money. Involving people who oversee that budget is very important. Having a relationship with the administrators and teachers in the school that they know that what they need will be gotten for them is very important. And knowing what's coming, what has been. For instance, if there was let's say a lull in revenue for a year, but we know there was a reason for that, there was something that closed, or there was a particular thing that happened, catastrophic event, whatever, then you know, okay, that was abnormal for that year. That's not something that we have to focus too much on. The same thing is understanding that if we bought a bus in this budget year, that was money that will not necessarily have to be budgeted the next year. So you have to look at a budget across long term. You have to be very aware, make good notes on why things happened the way that they did, because sometimes 3 years down the road you don't remember, but there should be notes of why things happened, why revenue decreased, why expenditures increased. And you involve the people who need the resources in those decisions, involving department heads, administrators, in talking about what the needs of the system need to be. It goes back to where are we trying to go. There are a lot of good things that can be funded. Most systems cannot fund everything that's good, so you have to know where the priorities of the district are. What are we trying to get to? Where are we trying to go? And to then allocate resources in those areas. When it comes time to cut, and many systems are having to face that right now, you need to go line by line through the budget to see where there may be some places to cut. You want to put the least amount of impact on the classroom. Teachers need their resources. The classroom needs to be impacted last as much as is possible in making any budget cuts. So you just go line by line, look at the history, look at what's projected out. I know right now we make notes on our budget. We put this money in, let's say, professional development line item, because this is what we want to do with that. We want to have a consultant, we want to do subs, whatever the thing is. Well, then if it comes time to cut, we look back and go, is that something we can put off, or is that something we need to do right now, based on what we've identified as our needs and our goals for the next year? What can wait? What is the highest priority? Did that answer that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I had one follow-up. In going through your application, it looked like you were over certain parts of the budget.
Yes, sir.
What parts? Are you dealing mostly with federal money, state money, or do you deal with local money at all?
Deal some with local, not as much. We had a new CSFO come in 3 or 4 years ago, and so he and I have worked very closely together, so I have been more involved with the local part than I have before. Dr. Neighbors, not Tim, Dr. Neighbors is my boss now, And he is very good about involving us in the budget process, going through the line items, explaining things to us. So I am involved somewhat with the local side. Hear a lot more than I actually do the numbers with, looking at, like when the 16 mil comes in and this, that, and the other. So primarily state and federal, to be perfectly honest, would be where what I would consider my expertise is, but a good working knowledge of local.
Thank you. Any other follow-up? No? Okay, Ms. Kelly, number 3.
Okay, what experience do you have with incorporating technology with teaching and learning, such as our One to World initiative? And how would you annually evaluate the effectiveness of teaching and learning with technology?
Technology is something that in our district currently we put a lot of money into and put into the classrooms, making sure that teachers have PD with it. So as far as the teaching and learning, I certainly have had a lot of work with that since I do curriculum and instruction. One of the things as I'm going into classrooms and looking is I try to gauge the effectiveness of the technology. Is this something that can only be done through that technology, or is this just another way to do an old thing? For instance, walking into a classroom, and we have Promethean boards, interactive whiteboards in our classrooms. If a student is just drawing a line to match something from one to the other, well, we could do that on a whiteboard. So I would not call that as effective instruction as some other things could be. I don't know that you can put a direct correlation between technology and student achievement, because I'm a firm believer that it's all about the teacher. The teacher's what makes the difference. It's not the device or the platform or the program, it's the teacher. And a teacher who effectively uses technology may be able to impact student achievement more than a teacher that does not. However, I've seen teachers who can teach anything with nothing. So technology is very hard to tie straight back to student achievement. One of the ways that I would want to look at evaluating it is to look at how it's being used. For instance, teachers can, and I probably need to preface this with not all teachers, because again, there are teachers who can do just as good a job without anything. There are other teachers who are very able to use technology in a great and mighty way. And different people have different styles. Some of that has to do with our age, and those that were raised in the digital generation and those of us that were not. But looking at, there's a, I don't know if you've heard the term of flipped classrooms, but really looking at whether teachers are using the technology to better enhance their time, to allow the time in the classroom to be that part that requires the teacher, and use the technology, let students use that at home for the part that does not require the teacher. Learning has a lot to do with being able to interact with the knowledge, and teachers being able to facilitate those discussions, being able to ask those higher order questions that a computer's not going to come back and ask. That's got to have the teacher there. So allowing the teacher more instruction with the children that only the teacher can do is really the way that you have to measure some of the effectiveness. I think another part would be looking at the, I'm not familiar with the platform that the teachers are using right now, but I think like JSU uses Blackboard as a platform. I believe that's the same thing Auburn, Alabama, and Troy use. So looking at, are we using the same type of platform for student learning that is being used in the secondary institutions, which is what they are going to have to do. So evaluating, are we preparing them for that next step? Looking at what's on the Edmodo sites or whatever to see, is it just assignments that we posted on there, or is it truly something that requires technology to be used? So there's a lot that goes into evaluating technology. I will be up front because I do believe in being honest. I want y'all to know who I am, because if I'm not the fit, this would not work. But I don't believe that every teacher should be forced to use technology to the same extent that everybody else is, because everybody's on a different they're in a different place and they're on a different trajectory. And we have to look at what our objective is. And if you can use technology to get us there, and you don't have to use technology to get us there, but we're all getting to the same point, that's the important thing.
Thank you.
Just as a quick follow-up question on that. Can you give us some examples of professional development that you might provide for teachers?
We have done several things. One that we are just recently doing is we have put Chromebooks into a lot of our classrooms, and we have had to go in and teach teachers on how to use QR codes. We had a lot of teachers that didn't know how to do that, so that we can then teach the students how to use the QR codes to get to the sites that we want to use. We have done some professional development for those that are ready on some flipped classrooms. We don't have very many that are even ready to kind of look into that, but we're trying to kind of push them in that direction. We have offered professional development on how to use the interactive boards more efficiently and not just having them be a place to post our PowerPoints, but how to actually involve students more in that learning. We have document cameras in all the rooms, and we've done a lot of work with teachers on how to not just, oh, here's the document camera and you can put a student's work under there and show it, but what does that mean? How does that translate to teaching? How do you take that and then make it a teaching experience? Those are the types of things that we've done. I personally have not led any of those, but I have found the people who know how to do it.
Okay, any other follow-up? All right, number 4, I believe Ms. Emily.
Next question. Superintendents understand that at the end of the day, student growth and achievement is ultimately what matters. Describe your experience in developing, implementing, and evaluating curriculum and instructional programs to raise student achievement.
Okay, this is where I spend the majority of my time, and I do have notebooks. I didn't give them to you beforehand, but there are some documents in here of some things that I've led to the creation of, so that you can look through those at your leisure to see. But we meet with teachers a lot to talk about what's working, what's not working. We developed pacing guides for math and reading, writing, social studies, science, that helps our teachers be in the same place. We do have some transient students, and one of the things that we feel is very important, that I feel is very important, is if we're all language arts teachers, it should not matter whose room we're in as to the quality of education that the child's going to get. So we need to all understand what the standards are, what it looks like in the classroom, what mastery of that means, because what I call mastery and what you call mastery may be different. So we need to come together and have an understanding of what mastery means, and then what that looks like in a student's work. So I've been able to lead the process of doing that and getting that into a document. The evaluation is an ongoing process, meeting with teachers. To give you a recent example, and I understand that y'all just went to the Wonders program in some of the grades. We're finding we use Wonders, and some of the grades we're not getting the results that we feel like we need to be getting. So actually last week called in 3 of our top-notch reading second grade teachers. We're starting with second grade, and the instructional coaches. And we just had discussions on what does reading need to look like? What are we finding in this program? What are we not finding in this program? What do we need to do as a system to not rely on a program, but to make sure that we are teaching students? So we've begun a whole new process. We'll meet again tomorrow. And in adding to what we've been doing, because we're not seeing the results that we wanted to through some of that. I go to many grade level meetings, department meetings, listen to the discussion of teachers. As I said before, what goes on in the classroom is That's where the rubber meets the road. That's what matters. And a teacher's growth and development comes through dialogue. Walking in and saying, here's what we're going to do, and this is, you need to do this, without any understanding of why, does not get you the results that you need. So spending time listening to the discussions about curriculum, listening to what's working in the classroom, listening to where students are having problems, listening to what the algebra teachers are saying they don't have when they get here that we've got to have if we're going to have them pass algebra. And then going back and saying, okay, how can we fix it? I'm very much a fixer, problem solver, and if this is an issue, let's find a way to overcome it. So working with teachers, I do believe very much in involving teachers with the development of the curriculum. They're the ones doing it every day, so they should be the experts. And facilitating the discussion, asking the questions, helping the growth process of teachers by explaining reasons, looking at research, talking about what's working in other places, and then looking at what our students need and writing that curriculum based on what the state standards are, adding to it if there's an issue. I was telling one of the people today that we also noticed with McGraw-Hill that in the very early grades there was not a strong phonics component, but we knew there had to be one, so we had to put in the phonics program in K through 2 that we felt like our students needed because it wasn't in the program. So not adopting a program and saying that's it, but doing that constant, going into classrooms, seeing what's going on, listening to those discussions, talking to administrators and teachers to hear where the pitfalls are, and then working to overcome them. And that's probably what I do most in my job right now. That's the fun part.
Okay, any follow-up? Nope. Number 5 is mine. Do you believe that extracurricular involvement leads to better academic performance and student motivation? If so, how would you evaluate extracurricular offerings and funding?
I do. I think that to remember that we teach children. We don't teach content, we teach children. We teach adolescents, we teach teenagers, we teach young men and women. And it's more than just what goes on in a classroom. There is a great deal of benefit to extracurricular activities. Almost all the research shows that when students are plugged in, that they stand a better chance of not dropping out. Especially in the upper grades, it's a way for students to make a connection with adults. All students need a relationship with somebody in the school. They need to know that somebody cares about them, that somebody knows them, that somebody knows their mother's name, that somebody knows their home situation. That's huge for students. In the elementary schools, teachers know that because they are overly involved in students' lives all day long, and they can tell you who their friends are, what bus they ride, what their nicknames are, who their parents are. They can tell you everything about students. And as students get older, they don't spend as much time with the teacher, so it becomes less. Well, that's where coaches, team sponsors, club sponsors, those are the people who then become the advocate for the children, that become the mentor to the child, that help build a lot of the things that are not necessarily in the classroom. I recently wrote a blog, and there will be a copy in the notebook that actually the title is, this was last week, I think I can remember it better, but academics, athletics, arts, and academics. And it talks about the correlation between all of them, that the same things we're teaching in the classroom, when we're teaching, like one of the math practice standards is to perseverance. Well, that's the same thing that you're learning when you're on a team of any type, whether it's a debate team or a football team. You're learning to persevere. You're learning that when it's not right, you go back and do it again. You try it again. You keep working on it until it's right. And you think about that in the classroom. That's what we ask students to do. Do your best work, and if it's not your best work, keep working on it until it is. So there's so many of the concepts that are just reinforced in a real life way through extracurricular activities. So I do believe they're very important. Funding is always an issue, and there again, I think that obviously the system cannot offer everything to everybody, so you have to identify what are the things that we want to invest in and be a part of, and if there's something that we're not offering, is there a way to offer it? Would it be too costly? You have to just weigh those things. You have to look at how can you fund it. Are there, I know I heard things about robotics today. If there's for like the best competition, which can get costly in some of the materials, is there a way to have any of the businesses in the area who are interested in making sure that our students have a strong engineering and robotics background that would help with some of that? So you have to look at some outside funding. There's always going to be some fundraisers with extracurricular activities. I don't think there's any way around that. And then deciding as a system, these are our priorities, and this is where we are going to be the best that we can be in these areas. Did that get all the parts of that?
It did.
Okay.
Sure did. Thank you. Any other questions, follow up on that? Okay. Mike, you're up. Number 6.
As a superintendent, how would you measure the progress or success of our school system from year to year, and how would you share this information?
There needs to be a plan with some goals of where we want to be, what we want to accomplish this year, next year. Some people do 5-year plans, some people do 3-year plans. I don't think it matters how many years, as long as you have a plan, and there's so much that can happen over multiple years. They have to be revised frequently. And then giving annual reports to the board on that. There's also a copy of the latest annual report that I did for the board on our strategic plan that gives you details of little things, as much as how much our AP enrollment grew, to whether we had a decrease or an increase in discipline, to how many miles we've traveled in buses this year, and how many breakfasts we've served. I mean, things that you probably may not have any idea, but it's a function of the school system, and it's very important to know that. Looking at specific goals of, if we were adding, I know we talked about CareerTech today, if we were adding a CareerTech pathway, then what kind of enrollment do we have? How did that work? Looking now, of course, we've got the career readiness indicators that every student has to graduate or should hopefully graduate with a career readiness indicator. How are we doing on that? How many of those were through ACT scores? How many of them were through an industry credentialing? How many of them were through the work keys? Looking at all of those different components. But in addition to annual report, I do think it's very important to keep board members aware of what's going on all along the way. We're implementing this new program, and we'll keep you updated on how it's going, or here's something that is going on in the schools that I really like for you to know about. It's all about communication and knowing what's going on, being aware of it, so that hopefully if a parent stops you, it's not like, I don't have a clue what you're talking about. Then you have some knowledge to be able to talk about what's going on, and then at least once a year to give some type of formal annual report on whatever we choose as a system to measure, to say, hey, this is how we've done this year. This is where we've grown. Here are the places that we didn't grow, that we still need to work, and having that prepared for you.
Thank you.
I had one follow-up. You touched base a little bit on the CareerTech. I noticed in your application that you had reconfigured a CareerTech program. Could you speak to that just for a minute or two?
I'll be glad to. And we do have a CareerTech director that I worked very closely with, so I cannot say that this was a me thing. It's very much a team, and anything I tell you that we've accomplished, it's a team, and I'm very fortunate to be able to help lead that. We had, first of all, in health sciences, we only had one classroom, and we were having to turn students away every year. So we added another health science class, And when we did that, we also expanded it. We're very much looking at ways that we know our students can get jobs when they graduate. Whether they choose to go to college or not, do they have a way to get a job? We have about 67% free and reduced lunch. And so we do have a population of students who will not either choose to go to college or will not have the means to go to college. And we want to make sure that they will be functional citizens that can do that. So we are adding an EMT program and sports medicine because in Opelika, that's one of the areas, the healthcare industry is one of the major employers in our area, so we want to look at that. Jacksonville would have to look at who are the major employers so that we can help have students graduate that are able to go into those areas. We had a lot of interest in a culinary program, so we have just added that this year. That's been exciting and fun to watch. That was transitioning from the family and consumer science area, which is, there's not a lot of job demand for that particular career path. There are some very good courses in there that you need for children to have, but at the same time, we had to look at some other areas where we could have students who had job opportunities, and culinary was one of the ways that we decided to go with that. So that is a growth in progress that we are trying. We added engineering a couple of years ago, and we used the Project Lead the Way curriculum, which has been phenomenal, and we've actually already backed that all the way down to primary. And the Project Lead the Way teacher that engineering course, we just added a really expensive 3D printer. And we are now partnering with some businesses that have come in to say, hey, can we send some things over for the 3D printer? So that's been great, and they've worked with our students on how to get that design going. Our CareerTech has really blossomed in the last 3 years, and it came from sitting down and going, what are we offering? Does that lead to a job? I mean, these are hard questions and hard decisions, but what are we offering? Does it lead to a job? If not, what is still valuable? Because there are some things that are valuable that, you know, the parenting class is very valuable. It does not always lead to a job, but it's a very good class. So what are the classes that are still very good for students? And what does our area need in the way of a workforce? And how can we be the ones to provide that workforce for our area? And we have expanded our agriculture, horticulture. We've had a very big horticulture for a long time. So we are now beginning to look at how to possibly add in some hydroponics and different things like that. It's exciting and it's fun, and the kids love it. We've added, actually we just added IT, and we sent a teacher to get trained in copper networking. Now we're talking about something I know very little about, but it has something to do with fiber networking and copper. And anyway, we're going to send them to that, be trained on the fiber as well, and being able to offer that to our students because we found out that there's a need for that. We do not offer the auto mechanics anymore because what we found were that students who took that were not getting jobs in auto mechanics. So that was one of the things that we transitioned over to some other areas. And we did that through attrition so that people were not losing jobs. As every position that comes open, we evaluate. Can this be better served in a different way? Does it need to be replaced just like it is? What other needs do we have that we might substitute this out for?
So you are tracking then what happens to your students after high school?
We are trying to. That is very difficult. Students change emails a lot, and it's amazing that once they get through their first year of college, they don't care about responding to surveys from their high school. But our counselors really are the ones who take it upon themselves to know where the students go when they leave. So we're trying to. We have looked at different ways, and actually there's a company that you can pay to do that. I didn't realize that, and they send out the surveys and try to track the kids down. It's a very difficult process, but we are trying, and particularly the ones in CareerTech, those teachers kept up with them because they were also helping them try to find some jobs.
Thank you.
Were you able to get state funding for those CareerTech? For the
Some,
teacher?
it was an area that we decided as a district, this was an avenue that we wanted to fund, so a lot of local money went to it as well. We have recently written a grant through the at-risk money that was available to fund some of the culinary that we're trying to do. We use a lot of the Carl Perkins money and state CareerTech money, but a lot of local money goes into it because that's a need that we have, and it was a goal that we had, and it gets back to that, what do you want to do? And that's what we wanted to do, and we made the decision to fund it.
Have you had any experience with asking the state to fund a program that's not currently in there, to go outside the box?
The state? That's right. No, I'm sorry, that was a little sarcastic. I might have to wipe that off the video. Yes, we do try to work with, and Dr. Cleveland, who has taken over CareerTech over the last few years, is very willing to work with us. As a matter of fact, we sought out their help in trying to identify some of the new programs to open. They were one of the ones that suggested the culinary, and were very helpful in helping us move in that direction. Didn't get any additional funding for it, but they did help us in thinking through and mapping out a process.
Thank you. You have a follow-up on that question? All right, Ms. Kelly, we'll go to number 7.
What is your approach to discipline, and how would you ensure that students have a safe, secure, and orderly environment for learning and for participating in extracurricular activities?
Safety and discipline, of course, is extremely important. And the first part of discipline is always on prevention. What can be done to prevent as many problems as possible? If we know transitions are an area, especially in a high school or a middle school, where that causes problems, then how can we provide additional staff and support during those times to prevent problems? The classroom, making sure that teachers have good classroom management practices in place is critical. But the bottom line is that if there are students who are interfering drastically with the learning of others, they should not be allowed to stay in the classroom. I mean, we've got to protect our students and our teachers, and we have to protect instruction. And I wish that there were systems that there were no discipline problems, but there always are. There are always some children who, whether it's because they cannot handle a large class size, and there are some students that are like that, who need a smaller setting to be able to be successful, or whether they are students who are have some challenging behaviors that need to be removed in some way to an alternative setting. I do think that that's critical. I think that there comes a point where you have to say that's enough, and the student we need to find another route for. That should not happen lightly, and it should not happen before there have been many, many other things explored, and talking to parents and working with counselors, and if there's a way to involve them in mental health programs, seeking that avenue, hiring someone to come in and help look at what's causing those behaviors, and is there a way that we can better manage it, helping us come up with some behavior plans. All of that should be done first. But at the end of the day, we have to support our teachers in the classroom. And I think that's important, but that's after a long process. I do think that every classroom should have rules and consequences, and I think administrators should follow up with that. I would expect an administrator, if there's a teacher who is sending students to the office for what people would call nitpicky, things, then I would expect the administrator to work with that teacher on how to solve that problem and how can they be a better classroom manager. Most teachers do it well, and they know when to send students to the office, and I would expect then the administrators to take the appropriate action with that, whether it's some type of in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension or parent conference or whatever. One of the least fun things, and it's almost funny sometimes because I don't like discipline hearings when they come to the central office. I have had to do some when the other assistant superintendent is out, and I don't like it because you're dealing with a student and they make mistakes, and you've got to weigh, is this a teenage mistake that we can overcome, or is this such a dire problem that we have to come up with a different solution? And that's almost like King Solomon, and it's not a fun situation to be in, but it's necessary, and we have to make sure that we're protecting our classrooms.
Thank you.
Any other follow-up on that? Okay, I've got number 8. Would you recommend implementing a program that you strongly feel would benefit students, even if funding the program would require dipping into local fund reserves?
That's not an easy yes or no, because you really have to look at the program itself. Is it needed or is it wanted? Is it all it's cracked up to be, or is it the latest fad? Is it, and I know it says in there, you truly believe what's good for students. And as I've said, I put, personally, my philosophy, I put a lot of stock in teachers. I really do. And if teachers are saying, we really need this is paramount to us being able to achieve what we're trying to achieve, and they can they can explain to me why, yes, I would probably say we need to do that. If it's just something, well, it could enhance this or it would be good for this, then I would probably say no. So it would have to be thoroughly evaluated. You would have to listen to the input of the teachers and weigh that with what the expected results are. There is the old saying that there's 2 superintendents, a fiscally sound and a former, and so you always want to be the fiscally sound and make sure that we're talking about tax dollars, and we need to look carefully at the benefit. And if the benefit outweighs that negative getting into reserves, and teachers feel strongly that they need it, then you need to go with that. And sometimes, I know as a principal, there were times where I would have some very good teachers telling me that they strongly needed a program, and there were times where I was thinking to myself, you could teach with rocks, but I value them, and I valued their opinion, and I valued the fact that they were saying we need this. And so then you get it. So I think that's part of taking care of your teachers, respecting their professionalism and their judgment.
There was a follow-up to that. What level of reserve funds do you think our system should seek to maintain as a floor?
I know that the state has the 1 month operating expense, but I really feel like every system needs at least 3 months operating expense in reserve. It would be great to have 6 months, but I think those days are gone for a while in the state of Alabama. But I definitely think 3 months is where you want to try to shoot for. You may come a little under it, but you really want to try to shoot for having 3 months.
Okay, thank you. Miss Emily, you're next.
How would you evaluate the effectiveness of teachers and administrators? Describe an experience you've had with an ineffective teacher or administrator and tell us how you resolved that issue.
Okay. Effective teaching is, if you're looking for effective teachers, you've got to look for people who are making learning relevant for children. We are past the days of learning facts and figures and formulas. The example that I always use with people is, I know the Pythagorean theorem. I can quote it. It's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I have no clue when to use it. I have never used it, but I'm sure there was a time I could have if I had known how to use it. So learning that in high school, and that was a really long time ago, learning that in high school, I could plug the numbers into the formula. Knowing when to use the formula, I don't have a clue. And we are at the day and age of teaching students not just numbers, equations, not just how to read, but how to think and how to think critically, how to problem solve, how to collaborate with each other, how to delve into our learning. And that's what effective teachers do. They help students. They facilitate that with students. They ask the right questions to get students to think, to what I call manipulate their knowledge, to work it around until they know what it really means and how to use it. Ineffective teachers, I have had a great deal of experience. Right now, I have to observe all third-year teachers before we recommend them for tenure, and that's great because it keeps me in the classrooms and observing. And of course, as a principal, there were times when I had to do that as well. Working with ineffective teachers, first of all, it should be a process. I believe that any teacher we hire, it is a mutual contract. We are hiring you as a teacher to give us the best that you have, to be well planned, to be in the classroom and teach bell to bell 180 days. But we as a system are also going into a contract with you that we will help you grow professionally. We will have the resources that you need and the support that you need to be the best teacher you can be. And that's a process. So the first thing that you do if you see that there are issues with some teaching is to provide the teacher help and resources. You go in and coach them through teaching lessons for them. You take them through an effective planning process to make sure that the planning's there. You let them go and watch other teachers who are effective teach, and not just send them and go observe, but go sit with them. Did you see how she did that? Did you notice this? Do you see how that happened? Do you see what happened here? So that they can see what you're trying to tell them. A lot of times teachers don't do something because they don't know what it looks like. My favorite question is, what does that look like? I ask that a lot. What does that look like in the classroom? Tell me what that looks like. If somebody says, well, we're practicing in elementary grades, we're practicing our fluency. Tell me what that looks like, because that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, and I want to know what you're calling that. So being able to let teachers see what that expectation is huge. At some point in time, obviously, you cross that line of where you feel like the teacher is not going to get better, is either not willing to, or does not have the skill set. And I would hope that that can be caught by the end of year 2. I do think that any teacher that's non-tenured, by the end of year 2, we should know whether they are going to be a good teacher or not. I hate to see teachers get into a third year and then be let go. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I think that's unfair to the teacher a lot of times. And those decisions have to be made. When you have tenured people that are not being effective, you keep working and working and working and continue to provide those resources to them. I do have an example of a write-up that I did. I'm a very, I'm a 1, 2, I call myself 1, 2, 3 ABC person. I don't believe in generalities. You can tell a teacher you need to work on your classroom management. If they knew how to work on it, they probably would have already done it. So I believe in offering very specific guidelines for what to do. It may be as simple as, in a high school, you need to have a bell ringer on the board when they walk in. They walk in, they sit down, they start to work on it. That's the first thing that needs to happen. So giving very specific instructions to help a teacher improve, and then going back in to see if they're making any improvement in it. And I've provided a write-up that I did. It's been a few years ago for a teacher. I still do write-ups. This one was just a little more extensive, and in how to give some specific directions to that teacher. The same thing is true with administrators. I work a lot with administrators, and I never want to erode an administrator's leadership in their building. So a lot of discussions with administrators are held one-on-one. If there's an administrator, let's say, that's struggling with how to lead a department meeting to get to where we're talking about instruction, I don't know how it is here. There are a lot of places where department meetings, grade level meetings, are still very much nuts and bolts, talking about, what time we're going to do what or something, rather than talking about instruction and how are we going to teach students. And so really, if there's an administrator who maybe is not sure of how to lead that, sitting down with the administrator one-on-one and saying, here are some things to think about. Here are some questions to ask. This is what this needs to look like. Unfortunately, working with an administrator many years ago that did have a very specific plan for improvement. So I provided you a copy of that, mainly, and I put you a little note in there, mainly so that you can see what my thought process is as I'm working with administrators, what I'm asking them to be able to do as administrators. There are, in today's day, administrators have to be very good managers, and they have to be very good instructional leaders. And that's very difficult to find. I mean, I'm just going to be perfectly honest. It is hard to find people that have such a skill set at both, that they can be really, really good at both. So it does require some coaching to be able to, in whichever area is not as strong, to be able to offer them very specific guidance on how to get better. And then at some point in time, if the hard call has to be made that they're not effective, and we got to do what's best for kids. It always comes back to what's best for children. And one of the measuring sticks I've always used is, with a teacher, would I want my child in that classroom? Would I want my child in that school? And if I wouldn't, then they're not good enough for anybody's child. And I think that's an important point to always remember in working with administrators and teachers. I don't know if I got all the parts of that question or not.
I think you did pretty good.
Thank you.
I do have something I was going to ask. On your resume, you mentioned several times with your response here about asking questions. I saw that you led a workshop on thinking through quality questions. So my question to you is, how would you use that information to help, if you were superintendent of the system, to help you in your role as superintendent?
Most teachers are not as, it does not come naturally to ask higher order questions. It's just not our natural way of operating most of the time. I think we're getting better at it, but it's not our natural way of operating. Using that information is being able to, as I'm walking through a classroom, like I was doing a walkthrough the other day, and one of the things, and I actually told the administrator, I didn't go tell the teacher, there's just something, oh, she told me that must mean I did something wrong. No, but we're trying to all get better. But I told the administrator, did you see when she asked them, and I don't remember now the specific, that would have been a perfect time to ask, and then I gave the next level of questions. So go back and give her some of that feedback, and then as you're going in classrooms, make sure you're looking at that as well. We do district-wide walkthroughs right now, and one of the things we're looking for are the number of higher order questions that are going on in the classrooms. And we talk to teachers a lot about putting it in explicitly in your plans. You can't come up with a deep level question. Most teachers can on the cuff. There are some that can, but most teachers can't just come up with it off the top of their head. So when in your planning, you have to strategically put in those higher order questions. And depth of knowledge is a big area right now where we're all learning that it's sort of equivalent to the old Bloom's taxonomy, but it's a little different. And the Aspire test is very much aligned to level 3 depth of knowledge questions. So we've got to look at what that means, what those are, how are we putting them in the classroom, are our assignments at that level of depth of knowledge. Those are the discussions that you have in those collaborative grade level and department meeting times where we can talk together. Oh, well, I hadn't thought about that question, and putting everybody's wisdom together to come up with it.
One last thing on that, I don't mean to belabor it, but do you encourage your teachers to seek national board certification?
Yes, very much. It's a great professional development process. It's a little costly for some, but it's a great professional development process. It requires them to be very reflective and to take a lot of time to look at their own work, which I think is a fantastic process. The state is moving to, in the teacher ed programs, a format that is very similar to that for all of the teachers that, I believe it starts in 2018, will have to do a portfolio type assessment that's going to be very tightly aligned to the, or look a lot like the national board certification. But I do think it's important, not just so that we can say, oh, we have this many national board teachers, and it doesn't mean anybody's any more effective than somebody else, but it is great professional development for the teacher.
Thank you.
Any other follow-up? Okay, number 10, Mr. Steve.
Describe your management style and what methods you have found to be most effective in supervision and building rapport with administrators and employees.
Management style is very situational. And sometimes I think I'm really old, but there's not a lot of new under the sun sometimes. And the old situational leadership that was so popular by Ken Blanchard back in the 80s still takes very much, is very important today. There are some people who need more direction than others. And there are teachers that we need to get out of their way and let them be, because they do phenomenal jobs. They're your trailblazers. They're going to be trying new things, and you just need to back up and say, let me know when you need my help. And then there's others that you have to be very specific with and more directive with. So leadership style is very much based on the situation. I am very collaborative. I'm also very opinionated. And I have reasons for why I think the way I do, and I'm able to articulate those. So I usually offer my reasons, and I articulate them. And leadership is about getting groups to come to the consensus of where we need to go. And good leaders know pretty much ahead of time what that needs to be, but you don't just go tell, because then you don't get the buy-in and you don't get the end product that you want. So you lead people to come to that. There have been many times when I have gone into a situation thinking this is what needs to happen, and have come out going, you know what, that may be what needs to happen, but it doesn't need to happen now. A good example of that, and I don't know how y'all feel about this, but it has to do with the Dibbles test. A couple of years ago, I was like, you know what, we need to get rid of that. It's run its course, and I'm not so sure it's very effective. But I came out of the meeting with some teachers that were, it was obvious that would have sent them over the edge to take away something that they were so familiar with. So it let me know, okay, then let's go back and look at, if that's where we want to get to, how do we get there, and how do we help the teachers get to that same understanding? So I try not to be dictatorial, which I'll be honest with you, early in my career, I probably was. And the older you get, the more you realize that you don't know everything you thought you did. And so my leadership style now is I listen. If somebody tells me there's a stump in the road, I start trying to figure out how we're going to get over it, around it, under it, whatever we need to do to move it. If our goal is to get down the road, we're going to get down the road, and how do we get there? involving people in discussions and getting back to that collaboration is good fuel for more ideas. Bouncing ideas off of each other tends to make ideas become better. And so my leadership style is very much collaboration, listening, going back to what's our vision, what are our goals, what's best for children, and then leading the district in that direction through lots of communication, lots of discussions and dialogue, being able to clearly articulate reasons, and being able to solve problems that come in the way.
Okay, is there any follow-up?
I don't know if I said a whole lot in that, but
How are we doing, Ms. Lisa, on time? Okay, we're just finished question number 10. We're about an hour into it. Anybody need a break? Is
are
everybody
you
okay?
telling me I don't need to talk so much?
No?
No.
Okay.
We would just probably say don't talk so much. Okay, Mike, you're next.
Okay, in a hypothetical classroom where a concept has been taught and 1/3 of the students have not grasped the concept, 1/3 of the students have partially grasped the concept, and 1/3 of the students have mastered the concept, what are your expectations about how to manage the pace of teaching and learning in this classroom?
You know, this is very easily said, and it's very hard to put into practice in a lot of places, but differentiated instruction is definitely the way to go. You're always going to have some students who need to move on. You have some who are just right on the right pace, and some that you need to go back and remediate with. That's very difficult to do in reality, and I never try to take that lightly in working with teachers to say, hey, we need to look at how we can differentiate instruction. If I can't go in and help do that, then we've got a different problem. So really looking at, is there a way to take the students who have already mastered that and let them move on in some form or fashion, whether it's to go deeper with the concept that they've already got, and I say a lot of times we can accelerate, and I use this example especially in math and in science. Okay, we can accelerate and we can move you up however many grades you want, but you're still only going to be able to get through calculus in high school most likely. So there's only so far that you can really accelerate to. But you can take what you're learning and go at a much deeper level and learn how to integrate that knowledge with other areas to be able to solve problems. So I do think we have an obligation to our advanced students to continue to challenge them and move them on and not let them just sit while we remediate. But we also have a responsibility to those that didn't get it to make sure that they get that content, especially if it's something that's essential. That is the challenge that every teacher faces when they walk into the classroom every day, because really and truly, every classroom has all of those levels and everything in between. So my expectation is that we use differentiated instruction, to try to answer the question, that we use differentiated instruction, that it may be asking some of those higher order critical thinking problems to those that have already mastered it, while we are remediating with those that haven't, and finding ways to do that. And I would be lying to you if I said I had all the answers, because I'll be honest, if I had the answer on that question, I'd be a millionaire right now. I'm just going to tell you. It's very difficult to do in the regular classroom, and I don't want us to ever lose sight of that there's only so hard teachers can work, and there's only one of them in a classroom. But that's the expectation. And I'm a roll up your sleeves and get dirty kind of person. So I believe in getting in there and helping, not just saying, here's what we need to do. But let's figure this out together. Let's find a way to do this. Let's try this. If it doesn't work, let's go back and try something else. And I think, I can't remember if it was on this question or one earlier that I didn't answer correctly, or that part of had to do with rapport. I don't know if that was on this one or an early one, but That's part of building that rapport with teachers, is being willing to, it's not we're all in this together, and we're all pulling on the same rope. And we need to all, I say a lot, they're your student from kindergarten to 12th grade. I don't care what grade you teach, they are your student from kindergarten to 12th grade, because they're our students from kindergarten to 12th grade, every one of them. And we are all a part of it, and we're all pulling on the same rope, and we've got to all be headed in the same direction. And that means everybody from the superintendent to the local school administrators, the teachers, the custodians, the CMP staff, everybody. And we're a team. And when any one part of that team is not working correctly, it all falls apart. And I always say you can tell the most important job by who the biggest hoopla when they don't show up. Well, if the cafeteria people don't show up, we got a problem. Bus drivers don't show up, we got a problem. Custodians don't show up, we got a problem. Teachers don't show up, we have a problem. Administrators don't show up, well, they might miss you, but that's not going to impact what goes in the classroom that day. So building that rapport is being accessible, listening, responding, and helping solve those problems. Not, well, here's what you need to do, and turn around and walk off. And that's the same way it is with this classroom. A third of them getting it and a third of them not. It's a hard task, but you can do it through differentiated instruction, and then you have to go back and follow up and see how it's working, offer alternative solutions if that's not working, try something else, and be able to. There have been times where I've said, you know what, I really don't have a good answer for this, but I'm going to go see what I can find out. And then find out what other people are doing, or look and see what's on the internet that's working in some other places, and bringing those ideas back and trying them. I read that question, I was like, wow, it's hard to do.
So, I hate to say this, but the follow-up to that is, of course, I think your expectation is that you would hope and want each group of those children to get what they're needing, although it's very
Correct.
difficult. But whatever your expectations are, how would you ensure that your expectations are met?
Well, a lot of that is in going back and walking through the classrooms and seeing if that's what's happening, making sure that administrators are going into the classroom and seeing what's going on. I know that there are, I've got kids' names in my mind right now from K through 12, that when I go into a classroom, I'm specifically looking to see what they're doing. They're either really high flyers, or some of them are needing a lot of additional help, and I want to know what they're doing in the classroom, and is what they're doing meaningful and beneficial. And then if it's not, talking to the administrator about how to go in and work with that teacher. So the way that you ensure that your expectations are, you're getting in the classroom, you're looking, you're seeing what's going on. And that's one of the beauties of a smaller system, is knowing all of your employees and being able to go in those classes and being able to see what's going on, and being able to sit down and get a feel for the different strengths and weaknesses of different people, so that you can offer suggestions based on their teaching styles. I always tell people when they say, well, I'm going to send this teacher to go and observe so-and-so, and I go, don't do that. If you've got Miss Pollyanna, everything's just great and wonderful, and every morning I'll just come to school so cheery, and then you've got this other one who's more subdued, they're never going to be alike, most likely. So you try to match up some of those personalities with how you're working with teachers, and being able to offer those suggestions. But getting into the classrooms a lot is the way you're going to make sure your expectations are met.
Thank you.
Okay, any others on number 11?
I just kind of had follow-ups. The differentiated instruction, so to borrow your words, tell me what that looks like when you walk into a classroom where that's occurring.
Okay. When a teacher's using differentiated instruction, it does not always mean that their instruction, their whole, what I call whole group instruction, when they're actually giving the concept, it may be the same, but the differentiation is going to be in what the students are asked to do after that. What are they being asked to do with that concept? It may be that if I've got a group going on, that I have this group over here that's been given a task that is much more difficult, and I actually go to this group to work with them to re-explain what I've just taught them, to go back over it again. So you will see the differentiation come in what's going on with the students when it's their turn to work alone. And it won't everybody be doing the exact same thing. Sometimes everybody will be doing the exact same thing. But when you're really trying to target that differentiation, you're going to see different levels of work targeted for different students.
Emily, you got number 12.
As the face of the school system, a superintendent is charged with working collaboratively with faculty, staff, students, parents, community members, and business leaders alike in varying capacities. Describe a situation where you've worked with people who have strong differences of opinion. That's never happened, right?
Never.
How would you handle this situation, and in retrospect, what would you have done differently?
I have found over the years, and this is something I've done differently in recent years, the biggest part of that is to listen to what people have to say. Listen, because usually what I found with people is if they feel strongly, have a strong opinion on a subject, there is some core value in there that's very important to them, or there is something that has happened sometime that has made them really fixate on it. And if you really listen to what people are saying, you can most of the time find out what that is, and that helps you understand where they're coming from. And once you know where they're coming from, it's a lot easier to look toward common solutions. Parents feel strongly about things for their children, and they should. They know their children. Educators feel strongly about things for children, and they should. They're trained professionals. Community members feel strongly about schools, and they should. Their money's supporting that, the education process. So being able to listen to all stakeholders, whether you disagree with my opinion or not, is very important. Like I said, the older I've gotten, I realize my opinion's not always right. Most of the time, not always. I tell my husband this always, so don't tell him any differently. But my opinion's not always right. I'm one person. I think I understand what needs to happen, but let me hear what you have to say. Then you go back to where are we going as a system? Some of the things that people have strong opinions about are not in any place that we are trying to move as a system. And so that makes it easier for that dialogue to happen. There are times where I've had to say, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this because I don't necessarily agree with you, but I'm not saying that you're wrong or I'm wrong. In education, one of the things I have come to understand, there are very few decisions that are right and wrong. Okay, unless it has to do with policy and legal and all of that. There are very few things that are right or wrong. It has to do with good, better, and best. So we may all be on this spectrum of what we feel like is good for kids, and we all believe that we know what's best. So we've got to look at what the commonalities are, look at what where we're going as a district, look at the perspective from which you come, and sometimes it's a matter of how can we meet whatever that is that's such an issue. Is there a way that we can address that while still moving on in this direction? What I have found is to be able to state my opinions. I'm trying to remember precise this. To be able to state my opinions and give the reasons. And I'm a very logical person, so I have reasons. And listen to you and hear your reasons. And sometimes it takes going back and reflecting and go, you know what? Those were some really good reasons that I hadn't thought about. And we need to go back to the drawing board on this. People matter, and every person should be valued, and their opinions should be valued. That doesn't mean you're always going to do it, It doesn't mean you're always going to take it, but it should be valued, and you should at least listen and think back through, let me rethink that. Is that a valid point or is it not? I think that's important. One of the things, just to elaborate that a little bit more, that I have found that helps, I don't take things personally. Most of the time when people are upset or they feel strongly about something, it's not aimed at the person. And I don't take things personally. Most people don't make it personal, and I don't take it personally. But that's always important. If it ever becomes so personal with me that if you question something I've said that I get offended, that's a problem. So I don't take it personally. I don't feel like I have all of the answers, and I believe everybody should be valued in their opinions.
Okay, any follow-up? I noticed in the application there was some information about community educational programs outside of the school that you were involved with. Could you talk for a minute about that?
Sure. I was very fortunate. One of them that I'm especially proud of. I was very fortunate to be a part of the Chamber of Commerce Education Committee. And one of the things that came out of that committee that I was able to be on the founding board for was our Lee County Young Leaders, where we modeled it after, of course, the adult leadership programs. And we identify juniors in high school, because seniors are way too busy. We identify, the schools do take applications, they have to write an essay. And we get 25 young leaders from around Lee County. And we take them tomorrow. We're doing public safety, where they will go and learn about what goes on at the jail and the fire and so forth. We take them, we do a nonprofit time where they learn about the community market, the food banks, those types of things. We do health education time. So really investing in them. They meet once a month. That's been a great process. We're in our 4th or 5th year this year, and that's great. I've had a great time working with the Chamber on that. I've also been a part of of like an inner city team that has visited. We went to Greenville, South Carolina a few years ago, and then last year we went to Cincinnati, Ohio. And that was with the mayor, economic development, president of the chamber. And I was fortunate to be able to go from the education part in going and looking at those cities to see what do they have that we might could bring back to help make our city better. And I was looking at the education part of that as well, and what can we do to make the education part better. And that's been a great experience. Being able to work some with not as much involved with the economic development as our superintendent is, but having had to fill in sometimes for him with the economic development and actually meeting with one of the industries that came into our community a couple of years ago, and not even knowing when you're sitting there talking to them where they're from, because they don't want anybody to know that, and being able to tell them what all's going on in our school system and being able to provide the workforce for them has been really exciting. So I've had numerous opportunities to be able to do that. Of course, I do some adjunct teaching with Troy, Phoenix City, and am able to work with some arising administrators, and that's always fun and exciting. But being involved with the chamber and the economic development has been it's been a lot of fun to see what goes on and how you get businesses to come in, and the part that the school system plays in that, to be able to these people have to know that the school systems can provide before they're going to bring their businesses there, and that's been very interesting.
Thank you. I've got question 13. As school board members, we're charged with making sure 3 things. One is there a clear vision for the system? Number 2, resources are allocated to achieve the vision. and there's accountability where it is clear if goals were achieved. How would you address vision, resources, and accountability in a system that has high standards, high expectations, and high achievers?
And I hope that's already been answered through a lot of the other, but I feel very strongly that a system has to have a vision and those goals, and that's what drives where the resources are. It's very interesting, actually, the class that I teach at Troy is tools for managing resources. And as I'm working with principals, that's one of the things I tell them. If you don't have a plan of improvement for your school, how can you know where to allocate extra teacher units if you have them, or the limited money that you may have, or any of the other resources that you have? And you've got to have that plan. And so I believe strongly that the district should have a vision for where we want to be. Top 5 is very ambitious. I guess it would be as determined by what, because there are so many variables out there. But having a vision for where we want to be, setting the goals to get there, and then you allocate the resources to support the goals.
Thank you. Do you have any other follow-up? All right, number 14, Ms. Kelly.
With funding tight, teachers and administrators and support staff have taken on more and more responsibilities. What would you do to keep them encouraged and their morale up?
One thing, and I probably do this to a fault sometimes, I would rather work harder than ask somebody else to. That's just the way I'm kind of put together. I try to always look and see, is there something that we can take off of the teachers, especially if we're going to add something on. And even right now, every time we say, okay, we might want to do this, we can do that, but what are we going to take off the plate if we do that? Because teachers cannot work any harder than they're working right now. Some of them can work smarter, but they can't work any harder than they're working now. So trying not to put anything else on the teachers. Administrators, you can put a little bit more on them. That's part of the job, and they know that. But again, it's a team that we're all working together on. And if I feel like there's something, right now we are doing the assist, and if y'all have never heard that word, fine, other people know what I'm talking about, but the assist and putting the CIPs in the assist, it's just a time-consuming task that we really need people working on teaching and learning and not sitting down and putting things in a computer because someone at the State Department wants it done that way. So we have tried to take that off of the school and said, how can we do that at the central office level to keep you from having to spend your time on that, because it doesn't impact teaching and learning, to be perfectly honest. So y'all really need to wait a while before you air these. Anyway, so looking at what's essential to teaching and learning, and anything that can be taken off of the plate should be. I think that listening is what keeps the morale high, and responding. When teachers say, this is not working, or this is ridiculous, or we're having to do this and there's no benefit to it, you listen to it, you go back, you investigate that, you think through it, you bring groups together to talk about it, and then you take it off the plate if it's not working. So as far as delegating more, I don't see delegating a lot on teachers. And then administrators, you work with them to see where the strengths are, what they can best do, what central office can best do. And of course, it's a small central office, so that will fall to a few of us. But where can it be done the best to give teachers and administrators the most time to do instruction? Because that's what they need to be focused on all day, every day.
Okay, there's the second part.
Okay, what's the second part?
Regarding teacher recruitment, what is your definition of a highly effective teacher, and how would you recruit teachers that fit this description to our system?
Okay, and I kind of said earlier what I felt like a highly qualified teacher was, and being able to teach those thinking skills and really engage students. Student engagement is huge, and real life problem solving. That's where it is these days in teaching, and that's what effective teachers can do. Recruiting teachers to the system, I think a big part of that is trying to get good interns to the system, because once they get into the system and they see what we're about and they see how great we are, then you can usually keep them, and that's a really important part of it. I know there are a lot of teachers who, I don't know in this area, but I've dealt with some who don't want interns because it is a lot of trouble. But I do think that's part of our professional responsibility to train the next group of teachers. So you work very closely with the universities. You go to recruiting events. You put your message out there to let people know you sell your system. Here's what we do for teachers. And the word of mouth of the teachers you have is one of the best ways to recruit new teachers, because they'll hear, boy, they take care of their teachers. We have the resources we need, and that's where teachers want to come to. And so you get the word out, you go to recruiting events, you work closely with any surrounding universities, and with Jacksonville State right there, getting those interns in so that you can evaluate them before you hire them, and then you go after them, and you don't wait late to hire. You have to start early. It's becoming a much more competitive market than it's ever been. People used to say, oh, elementary teachers, there's so many of them. There aren't a whole lot of them anymore. It's becoming more and more difficult to find high-quality teachers, so you have to be prepared to hire as early as possible, and to go after the teachers that have proven themselves in the field.
Thank you.
Okay, any follow-up? Mr. T, number 15.
Describe a school wellness program and what you know about implementing one.
I've never implemented a total school wellness program. Of course, school wellness, you have obviously the nutrition component, you have a fitness component, environmental component, and I've had parts of those in different places. Recycling, of course, is certainly a part of a school wellness program, and helping them learn about environmental concerns. In the fitness part, I've had PE teachers who do things like Run for the Fun of It, where they run laps every day, and when they get to a certain number of miles, get a t-shirt, something like that, to really emphasize daily fitness. We are implementing this year in one of our fifth grades, one school in the fifth grade, a bikeology curriculum. This is going to be a pilot where we're teaching children about bike safety and how to ride a bike, and the benefits of riding a bike. That's certainly a part of a wellness program. And of course, with all the CMP guidelines, the nutrition part in the cafeterias comes mandatory. But being able to infuse that in different ways into the curriculum has certainly helped. But I have never implemented a full, here's a wellness program and we're going to implement this, K-12 in a system, but have implemented different parts of one.
Did y'all have wellness committee meetings? How often did y'all have those?
The correct answer is yes. No, we do not have a lot of them. Our cafeteria manager does some with the nutrition part in the schools, but we do not have a wellness committee that we get together. Now, as a principal, I did, because we were required to, for one of the things that we did, and we just had some parents who came in and we talked about it, but nothing more structured than that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any follow-up to that?
I don't to that, but if we go back to the previous question just real quick on the recruitment of teachers, being we're in your location and having Auburn University there, do you find that most of your teachers receive their degree from Auburn, or do you have a diversified sort of educational background amongst your staff?
We have pretty diversified. Now, we recruit at Alabama, Auburn, Troy, Columbus State, North Alabama Consortium. So there's several different places that we go and do recruiting. We do get a lot from Troy because one of the things that we have found is a lot of our Opelika people go to Troy to school, and so we do get some back that have been to Troy. We've got some from Sanford and Montevallo, but the majority of ours come from Troy and Auburn. A few from Columbus State, a few from Alabama, but the majority from Troy and Auburn.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike.
Okay. Yep. As you're aware from touring the schools today, we do not have a middle school, which means that 7th and 8th grade students are at the high school. Given our limited facilities in this area, to what extent would you separate middle school aged students from high school students, and why?
I think it is important to separate them for the most part, and the main reason for that gets back to what I was talking about earlier with relationships. Middle school students, 7th and 8th graders, they're just a different breed of children, but they have very unique needs. And being with teachers who understand adolescent behavior and who understand the difference between bad behavior and being, 13 is huge. And it takes a special teacher to be a good middle school teacher, I believe. So I do think that they should be as isolated as possible to allow the teachers to be able to form relationships with those children. Sometimes if they're too much a part of some of the older ones, they begin to realize it's not cool to let a teacher be a friend or something like that. So you have to be careful to take them where they are in that age of development. A lot of that gets back, though, to what are our goals and our objectives. And sometimes it may be more important. I know that, like today, I asked about electives types of things for students, and they do go, I think, into the high school for that. Well, that's important because electives are a very important part of a middle school curriculum. So if that's the only way that can happen, then it needs to happen that way. But I do think it's important because the needs are so different to try to, if you can't do it completely, at least make sure that you give time for them to be together in an area where the teachers can really focus on the needs of that age group.
Thank you.
Okay, any follow-up to that? All right, number 17 is mine. What strategies would you employ to increase enrollment, and what are your thoughts on open enrollment?
Strategies to increase enrollment, I think the most important thing is to get the word out. Make sure that people know what Jacksonville City Schools have to offer. Make sure they know the quality of the programs that are in place at Jacksonville City. The goal is for people to move into Jacksonville and live here and reside here and be a part of the community and to put their children in the schools here. So that's the ultimate goal. Open enrollment has its pros and its cons, just like everything else. In the day and age of the accountability system the way it is, you have students coming in, and if they come in and even if they paid to come in, let's say they come in 9th grade and decide in 10th grade to drop out, they're yours. You know, they count for Jacksonville as dropout. That kind of thing you have to be very careful about. But I do think that when you have a good system, there may be reasons that you want to open that enrollment up so that people can take advantage of that. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other because it gets back to there's pros and there's cons. And as a district, we have to decide, is this part of where we want to go and what we want to be? And can this help us reach our goals? And it may be. And there may be students that come in an open enrollment and then because it is so great, then the families do move here. Because I do think that should be the ultimate goal, is that the community is growing and thriving, and people are wanting to move here to put their children in the schools here. And so sometimes if they don't have to move here, then it becomes too easy not to. So I don't have a strong opinion. It's pros and cons, and you just have to weigh it out and decide as a district which direction is the way that we want to go with this, because there are positives and negatives.
Okay, thank you.
The next question. Providing all stakeholders with necessary and appropriate information regarding matters of the school system is critical. What are some examples of specific strategies that you've used to promote public support for school activities, budget, and instructional programs?
We've done several things over the last few years as we've been working really hard to get the word out about our school system. One thing that we did was more of a kind of marketing strategy, and we mailed postcards to all the residents of the city that outlined just a little bit. I wish I thought to put one of those in there, but outlined a couple of the initiatives or the things that were going on that were really special, and we got a lot of positive feedback about that. The public relations coordinator and I really worked on that. Another thing that we did, and this came from listening, to, like I said, to stakeholders. I happened to be at it doesn't matter where, but anyway, I had a parent who came up to me and said, why do we not give the same value to students who get scholarships that we do to academic scholarships that we do to students who get athletic scholarships? And she said, they have the sign-in day, and you take the pictures, and they're in the paper. And I went home and I thought about that. It took me 3 or 4 days, and I thought, why can't we have an academic signing day? And it had a lot of roadblocks because there's not one day that they sign for a college scholarship academically. But we worked it out, and last spring was the first time we did it, and it was great. We had 2 different academic signing days. And we had one, I believe it was early March, and then one again in early May. And anybody that had accepted a scholarship prior to that, then they were a part of that. And we did it just like we did with the athletic signing days. We had the tables with the tablecloths set up, and the parents came in, and we did the pictures. And it was great. It was a great PR move, and it was good for our students to understand that, getting a $70,000 scholarship to Auburn was just as important as the one that signed the football scholarship. So that went over really well. We have increased our presence on Facebook and Twitter, and a blog, and you have an example of that in there. But that's been kind of my baby's blog, but one other guy helps write some of them too. And we don't do it so often that parents are like, oh great, they just put something else on there and don't read it anymore. We only do one every so often, and then it automatically posts to Facebook, and parents will read it. That's how we put a lot of information out about our Project Lead the Way curriculum, and we were able to put some videos out about things going on in the classroom. So we've really been working to get that message out of the good things that we have going on. We have some realtors coming sometime in the next couple of weeks to tour some of our schools, and that's huge. That has not always been a partnership that's there, and we've worked really hard to try to involve them in our schools so that they can help sell the homes in Opelika, and so we're excited about them coming. It's a constant process, and it takes a lot of thought, and it takes a lot of very purposeful, intentional strategies to help market the school system. Was that all that part of the question?
The other part is, how would you work to ensure all groups are fully engaged with the school system?
How would you involve all groups? What?
Are fully engaged with the schools?
Okay. I think you have to look at all the different segments of the population and of the community and what they have to offer to the school systems, and then try to bridge those or make partnerships there in inviting them in, taking time to do different types of curriculum nights or technology nights, or obviously you've got your PTO or PTAs, and then business community, trying to get those members to come in. We've had a lot of success through the CareerTech with the advisory committees that have to be a part of CareerTech, with businesses being able to come in and go, oh, wow, well, we could partner with you this way. So it's, again, it takes a concentrated effort to identify a segment of the community and say, how can they plug into our schools? How can they be helpful to us, and how can we be helpful to them? What kind of partnership can we forge there to benefit both of us?
Okay, any follow-up? Number 19 is Steve.
To what degree do you believe responsibilities can and should be delegated to principals?
Well, I kind of answered that one earlier, didn't I? But I do think that principals are definitely charged with the day-to-day operations of the school, and they should be seen as the instructional leader in their school. And so a lot of the delegation that goes to that would be around the instructional process and how to monitor that, and how to work with teachers, and how to have effective dialogues and collaborative meetings. I don't think that busy work should be delegated to principals, because, again, the most important job is that of the classroom teacher, and we need them supporting the classroom teachers, and we need them supporting instruction.
Okay, it had a second part, you answered part of it, but it says provide examples of how you hold them accountable for accomplishing those responsibilities.
Most of that is through meetings and dialogues, talking to the principals to find out what they've been doing. Have you been back in so-and-so's classroom? Have you gone and observed this? What did y'all talk about at this grade level meeting or this department meeting? Or how have you been working with your new teachers? Just asking those questions. What are you doing every day? Tell me what you're seeing. Tell me what's going on. And offering help and suggestions to them. I know there have been new administrators that I've done walkthroughs with, where I've walked into a classroom with them and said, okay, when we come back out, what did you observe? And then I share what I observed. And then, okay, you were looking at 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to encourage you to look at these things when you're going in the classroom. So spending time building those relationships, keeping very much a partnership going, where there's a lot of dialogue going between the administrators and myself, and that we all know which direction we're moving on. And administrators I think they want to do a good job, and if you put those expectations there, they're going to meet them, because we've all got the same objective of doing what's best for children in the classroom.
Thank you.
Okay, any follow-up? I had one follow-up question. Your background as elementary principal. What's the biggest difference between elementary versus a high school principal, that if you were transitioning from an elementary to a high school principal, that you would tell that person, hey, here's what you better watch out for. This is what you haven't experienced yet at the elementary level?
High school principals have so many more moving parts in their building. It is very easy for their time to be consumed with things other than instruction. Whereas in elementary, that's what we do all day long, is instruction. So discussions that I have had have revolved around the fact that, yes, there are 1,000 different things pulling at you, the athletics, the cheerleaders, the band, all of those, parents, teachers, everything. But you have got to make time to get into the classrooms. You've got to be seen, you've got to be visible. And it's a trap that a lot of secondary principals fall in. They become tied to their office, not because they're a bad administrator, but they have not figured out how to separate the tyranny of the urgent. They start responding to what they think is urgent and forget what's important. So I would work with any new principal at a high school level on allocating quality time to looking at instruction, to getting to know what's going on in the classroom, to utilizing the resources that you have with your assistants and your counselors to make sure that things are not falling apart or not getting taken care of, but that we still know instruction's the most important thing. And it's a much harder, it really is a much harder role. You couldn't have convinced me of that before I got to see K-12, but it's a much harder situation because there are so many different moving parts that everybody thinks is critical at the moment. So.
Thank you. All right, our favorite question, the last one. Ms. Kelly?
Okay, thank you. We have 6 quality finalists for this position. Why should the board select you?
I've asked myself that a few times, but I really do think that as I've been doing research to look to see if this is a system I would be interested in, because as I have told a couple of people, I have a great job. I love my job. I have a great boss to work for, and I would be happy staying there until I retire. But as this position was brought to my attention, and as I began looking, I felt like what Jacksonville City Schools needs in a superintendent is the skill set that I have. That the communication, I'm a very effective communicator. I believe in collaboration. I believe in having reasons for making decisions. Having been in a small system, even though it's 4,200, which is larger than this one, it's still small to me. I have learned ways to work with the community to build a consensus that it's all of us. The Jacksonville City Schools are a part of the community, and that should be as important to the mayor as it is to the city council, as it is to you all, as it is to all of us that work here. The experiences that I've had in Opelika have provided me with, when I look at the two systems, there are a lot of similarities in the resources that are available, in the being close to universities, all of those types of things. And I believe that I can take this system to the next level. I believe that what I have trained doing for the last 8 years will help with the curriculum part as well as the management part. I think as I've watched many of your board meetings online, I've gone back, I heard the budget hearings, I have researched, I guess, because I'll be honest with you, I don't want to get into a bad situation. Like I said, I have a good place to be. And as I have looked at what Jacksonville City, where you are and where you want to go, I feel like I have the skill set to take you to that level. You do have 6 very good candidates. Listen to their bios, and they are very good. And I think everybody has a different set of skills that they can bring to the table. And I feel like that I have it all. I feel like Jacksonville would be a place to live, for however long that the system would keep me around, and would be just a great place to live and thrive, and it would be exciting to promote the school system and to forge it to that next level. It was like, as I listened to, sorry, I get excited about this, but as I was listening to all of this, I thought it's like Jacksonville's, it's just at the brink. It just needs the push to get on to that next spot, and that's exciting. And I feel like I have the knowledge and the energy and the ability to do that for Jacksonville, and that's why I think you should hire.
Well, I think you answered this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
As superintendent, how important do you feel it would be to live in Jacksonville?
You know, I got to tell you, I was surprised when I saw that question on there. It's surprising to me that a superintendent would not live there. That was what was surprising me, and there would be people that wouldn't. Being superintendent is not just a job. It is about community. It's about being here. It's about being a part. It's about becoming a part of the living, breathing organism of the community. And I think it would be critical. I don't know how it could be separated, because if you're not a part of the community, it seems like it would just be a job. And to me, the superintendency is so much more than that. So I think it would be necessary, critical.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any follow-up? Okay. Before we conclude, I wanted to see if you had questions for us.
I don't think so. I've been able to pick Mr. Neighbor's brain today, so I've had most of them answered. He answered a lot for me as far as I had some questions about the budget, and of course, it coming in at a deficit, that's always a concern. And I had some questions about community support, because it is very important to have community support. And he assured me that this is a very supportive community. And because the school system can't do it alone, it takes everybody. And so he's answered a lot of my questions that I've had, and I appreciate his willingness to take time to do that.
Well, thank you for coming in, and just a couple of logistics. We scheduled a board meeting for October 19th,
Okay.
and we hope that our decision will be made at that time.
Okay.
We will be calling some references. I'm sure that the board members will do that as they feel necessary. And
Right.
just wanted to make you aware of that. And does anybody else have any other comments or questions? But we really appreciate you coming in,
Thank you.
and we're excited
I
about
appreciate
your
the
interest in our
opportunity.
school. Right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So good to meet you.
I don't have a gavel. We're done.
I